What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. Today we have a video discussing the state of the comic book market and looking at factors that I think no comic book collector could have really seen coming. We're going to dive into it, but before we do, please, folks, check out the links in the description below and make sure you guys sub up if you're here for the first time. I also want to thank today's sponsor, popculturezone.com. Their link is below as well. Check them out for some awesome online retail comic book sales. I'm going to leave a 60-second clip at the end of this video for you guys to check out when we wrap here. But let's just get into this, folks. It's been a crazy two and a half years for all of us. Obviously, COVID came and wreaked havoc on the world, and it impacted the comic book hobby in this industry in so many ways. Some good, some negative, but there was a lot of, talk over this time, over these last couple of years about what these certain factors are going to do to the comic book hobby. A big one that comes to mind is, all this stimulus checks or all this bonus unemployment that people are getting. They're just blowing it on comics, and the comic value started booming. We saw that about a year ago now, close to a year ago, when they really hit their peak going into summer of 2021. And everyone's like, the comic book market's gonna crash and people are gonna run out of stimulus money. There's so many factors that went into these last couple of years. And here we are, almost middle of 2022. The comic book industry is going strong. It is. And we'll talk about a little bit of the ups and downs over the last couple of years. But the biggest thing that we're going to talk about, folks, that I don't think anyone really saw coming, inflation. Inflation and how that impacts the hobby. So, like I always like to do, I like to use building blocks to get to the point that I'm trying to make it. This is very important to understanding the totality of the discussion here. So we have to look back. Let's start at the beginning, okay? So leading into spring of 2022, you have to understand where the comic book market was then to gauge how did COVID over the last couple of years impact the hobby, and how is inflation and other variables impacting it from this point in time into the near future. You guys got to understand that the comic book hobby in 2019 leading into 2020 was very, very healthy. We saw a record number for revenue coming in to the publishers, which consisted of floppies, digital, graphic novels, etc. 2019 was a record-breaking year. It crossed over the $1 billion mark. Now, a lot of people don't just like to look at that number and say, oh, well, that's the only thing that you can use to gauge the market. Some people think it's, kind of manipulated because those sales from the publishers on the primary market or that are going to the primary market, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are still buying comics, because those numbers are from what LCSs are buying, what the retailers are buying, and how many of those are ending up in back issue bins that can't even be sold for $1 or $2. Okay, fair argument, but still, it is a factor, and we have to look at that. But the secondary market was also booming in 2019 and years leading up to this. You can follow the trends. You can look at blue chip keys, golden, silver, and bronze age, and even copper age, and even more modern keys were on the rise. And I think a lot of this was due to live action comic book material. We saw that over that last decade. From 2010 to 2019, it really impacted a lot of more people coming into the hobby, a lot of more money being spent into the hobby and on the secondary market. So going into 2020, you have to understand that the state of the industry was very healthy from almost all aspects. The variant market was booming, all right? Now, retail in general, not just comic books, has been struggling in this new day and age, and that's another thing that I'm not really going to get into. It's just the shift because of modern technology, right? But let's go into when COVID hit in 2020. Obviously, LCSs had to close their doors. A lot of people were out of work. Over those first few months, it was tough for a lot of people, and I think there was a pullback from people spending. I do. But after those first few months, you started seeing things change and evolve. You started getting the LCSs or the dealers or the sellers that said, I'm not just going to sit at home when my door's closed. We're going to take to Facebook Live sales. We're going to take to Instagram Live sales. And then you had individuals that were working from home that were now not going out to eat, not going on vacations, not going on cruises, not going to baseball games, into the movies. So they had excess money in their pockets to spend. You did have stimulus checks coming in. You did have people getting not just your base unemployment, but extra unemployment. And I always like to say this, folks. I am not going to sit here and generalize or stereotype people that are getting unemployment or stimulus money, that are, and just saying that they're blowing it on or they blew it on frivolous things. I know a lot of people, including myself, because I lost my job. I had to utilize that money to survive. And when there was a little extra, I was able to actually set it aside for later on for some real life expenses. Now, I'm not going to say that there weren't people that had a little bit of extra money in their pocket, whether it be from extra unemployment or stimulus, or just because their spending habits changed because of COVID. It absolutely brought a lot of more money into this hobby, and to say, I'm not doing this, let's put it in the comic books. I'm not doing that, let's put it in the comic books. And I think another thing that we need to take into consideration that brought sales up between 2020 and 2021 was the fact that not just about extra money being in people's pockets, but that everyone was in front of their screens, everyone was in front of their phones, everyone was in front of their computers, and everyone was at home. And what did we start doing? We started watching these live sales. We started sitting on eBay more and more, just watching auctions, and we started watching more and more YouTube, including myself, and boom, you have all these factors and variables, and when you put them all together, you could see what started happening in the market. Fast forward, end of spring, early summer 2021, you really see the market boom. Now, around the same time, going into the summer of 2021, you started seeing the world getting back to normal. People started going back to the workplace. Everything started opening back up. Mandates started to lift. People are going to the movies again. People are taking cruises and going on vacations again. They're driving a lot more. I remember I put gas in my truck in March 2020, and I didn't fill up again until over a year later. That's no lie. That's no lie, because I went back to work in person at late August of 2021, and it was like late August or early September that I finally put gas in my truck again. Of course, we had the family vehicle that we used to do things during that time, but I'm just trying to make a point, folks. A lot of that, expendable income that was, set in our laps because of everything shutting down, because of working from home, because of unemployment, because of stimulus checks. Now we're getting back to normal. We're putting gas in our vehicles. We're going places. We're taking trips. We're eating out. Okay. I think we started seeing a little bit of not just money, but energy and time. How much YouTube are we consuming? How many eBay auctions are we consuming? Not as many. We're pulling away. We're getting back to normal life. And you could see that dip starting to happen in the market. And it was a healthy dip, in my personal opinion. Nothing was crashing. We have the element of the extreme FOMO spec market right now, and that's a whole other conversation. I'm talking about the bulk of the market, even on solidified key comics where you could see things dip. You started to see UF4 dip. UF4 made huge waves, and then it dipped down, but now it's starting to come back up again. So I think those dips were actually healthy, and now it got a lot, anytime a market dips, you get people coming back into the market, and that's going to now drive prices back up again. So if you look at where we're at right now, and we look back at all those people like back in 2020 or even 2021 saying the market's going to crash, where we're at right now almost proves those people wrong. Because we're at a state right now where a lot of those books that dipped after the 2021 boom, they're on an upward trajectory again. Okay? Healthy, market. Now, here's where we get to the factor of where I don't think anybody really saw this coming or really pulled this into the argument of the state of the market, and that is the insane inflation. I believe we've seen the worst rate of inflation in 40 years. It's been absolutely crazy. I mean, I just filled up my gas tank in my 15-gallon tank truck today. $80 because I'm paying $6 a gallon for gas. Food is up. Chicken is up about 3 times what it was last year, per pound. It's absolutely crazy. Everything right now is costing an arm and a leg. The vehicle market is up. The auto market is up. If you're out looking for a used car, you can't find even a used car with 150,000 miles on it that's 15 years old. It's going to be like $8,000 at this point, where just a couple years ago you could get one for half that. So how is this going to affect the market now? Because you take into everything that I just said about now we have less expendable income. We're spending money in other areas. This comic book market was not going to crash, in my humble opinion, looking at all the data, based on stimulus checks, based on unemployment, and based on anything in that realm of the COVID era. There's no way that it was going to crash. There's always corrections in markets. There's ebb and flow. And that was inevitable. But if you look at the trajectory of the market, I'm reiterating here, pre-COVID, it was already on an upward trajectory. And after we kind of went on that downslope, after this COVID era, it was inevitable that it was going to do this again. But what about inflation? When families and individuals are spending more and more on everyday necessities, food, clothes, shelter, gas, vehicles, all of those things, that right there, it's not a decision on not spending expendable income. It's the fact that they don't have expendable income. It's taken away from them without them having any autonomous ability to control that. That takes the ability for more and more people to spend money on those wants next to those needs and necessities. I think this is very imperative right now because we've seen, we go back 14 years now into the 2008 recession and those, 5+ years after that, and how that affected the middle class, even the upper middle class. And you guys know, this is a buzzword. The middle class is shrinking, and it's a fact. It is a fact. We live in a day and age where the middle class is becoming the struggling working class. And I know because I've been there myself, and quite honestly, I'm still there. We go to school, and we are in debt for life now. That wasn't the case 40, 50 years ago. We are paying, and I did a study on this. In college. I did this in 2018. In 2018, next to 50 years ago, from there, which would have been 1968, on average, individuals were making over 30% less in salary, if you take into consider inflation to 2018 standards. But they were paying over 30% more for mortgage payments. They were paying 30% more for new cars, 30% more for food. So even 5 years ago, we were making less, right? And everything was costing more. Fast forward 4 to 5 years now in 2022. That's even worse. And I haven't calculated the numbers, but it's worse by a mile because a lot of those costs from 2018, you look at gas costs, you look at food costs, they have, you look at cost of vehicles, they have doubled to tripled. And what have wages done? Well, wages haven't done much because the federal minimum wage of $7.25 is still $7.25. State minimum wages have gone up some in California. They've gone up a decent amount over the last few years. But the competitive wage hasn't really gone up that much. For example, me as an educator, I don't get paid that much as an educator. And over the last 3 years that I've worked as an educator after graduating college, I have seen the minimum wage, and I'm an advocate for a larger minimum wage. I am. But when the minimum wage does this and catches up to my salary and mine doesn't move, that's a problem. That's a problem. So as the minimum wage goes up, I should be, the ratio should push me up too. But it's not. So more and more people are struggling, and it's taking money out of our pockets. So how do we round this off when it comes to comic books? I don't think we've seen the last of the hurt of the inflation. I think inflation is going to continue to bite us at least probably into the fall. Markets are down. The crypto market basically crashed. Over the last couple of weeks, the crypto market dropped more than 60%. The S&P 500, I think, dropped over 15% in just last week, I believe, if I remember correctly. People are scared. People are losing money. So you have two things that can happen right now. Okay? On one end, which could be a positive, you have people wanting to invest in tangible assets. Anytime the value of the dollar goes down, you can get rid of that dollar, invest in a tangible asset, because that tangible asset will end up being worth more as inflation rises. So, for example, I'm going to pull a random little comic book out right here. Let's just say this comic book is worth $3, right? So if I know that the value of if I have $3 cash and the value of my $3 cash is decreasing because of inflation, but right now I could buy this for $3. I'm going to buy it. And then as the value of my dollar goes down, that means the value of this comic book is going to go up. So maybe in 6 months from now, because of inflation, this comic book is going to be worth $4 or maybe $5. So then my money, my $3 now invested in a tangible is $5 later, right? And you take this into account when the market, you're not only, our interest rate's a problem right now, but you're not seeing any gains. You're seeing such high extreme losses on the market across the board. So that's a good thing. That could be a good thing for comics that brings in more demand onto the market for people looking at comic books. But on the flip side of that, you can have a similar group of people that may think, I need to liquidate. I need to liquidate because it's not right now. I've lost all my investments, or I don't have the means to put more into investments, and I need to liquidate the tangible assets that I'm holding because I can't afford the higher gas prices. I can't afford the higher food prices. I can't afford the skyrocketing rents and property taxes. So then you get people that are liquidating their tangible assets and liquidating their comic books. So now you can have more influx of supply on the market, which can lower the value. Now, you can have a couple things happen. You can have a certain amount of people bring in more supply because they want to liquidate, but then maybe demand kind of keeps up because you have more people looking to take their investments and invest in those tangible assets. So if those two things are happening at a similar rate, if a certain percentage of people are liquidating while a certain amount of new percentage of people are shifting their investments into tangibles, that could keep supply and demand at a competitive rate. that can keep the prices where they're at right now, or hypothetically, even continue to drive prices on the market. Or people can be liquidating so fast that even those that are coming in to shift their investments into tangible assets, it might not be enough. And it could continue to lower the price because demand is not keeping up with supply. In conclusion, do I think the comic book market is going to crash? If you look at the generalized comic book market over every recession, you could arguably say that comic books in general are recession proof. Now, nothing is recession proof. Nothing is proof of anything. Nobody knows the future on any investments. Nobody can predict it. And nothing is ever guaranteed to increase in value or even stay at the value that it's at. But we can look at precedent and show that comic books have remained strong during recessions. But you can't generalize comic books. It doesn't mean that my modern books my modern variants are going to hold value, right? It doesn't mean that my recent movie spec White Vision book is going to hold value, right? It really pertains to more of the blue chip keys. It also can pertain to the vintage market, so to say, where even your Silver Age or your Bronze Age commons can retain value, and that can happen simply due to inflation. Where you could find Bronze Age run fillers for maybe $3, $2 or $3 5 years ago. Now, you're lucky if you're going to find them for under $5. That can hold just because of inflation, no matter of supply and demand, right? And even, some of those more modern keys that at least have precedent can definitely hold during a recession to a certain extent. Sometimes a lot of these books have even increased during a recession because it all goes back to basic supply and demand. But I will say this, I am concerned with the market. I am not a professional advisor, but I am absolutely concerned of what's going to happen over the next year. Quite honestly, if I had to invest in the market or comic books right now, I would definitely put my money into comic books for the most part. And it's certain comic books, not all comic books, specific comic books. So my advice to everyone out there right now, don't panic. That's with any investment. People don't realize that if you're pulling out investments because you need money because of the inflation right now and the hits that you're taking, that's one thing. If you're pulling out because you're panicking, you're just making it worse. The same goes with comics. If you're selling because you need that money in your pocket, that's one thing. But if you're selling because you think that the comic book market is going to drop, that's another. And again, I'm not even talking about this, live action movie spec hype where $2 books are shooting up to $150 books the next day just because of some rumor. That's a whole other conversation and a whole other video. For us collectors, continue to collect what you love, guys. Continue to be responsible, pay your bills, focus on what is important in life, what are the necessities, and then from there, hopefully we could still manage to have expendable income to put into the hobby that we love, right? So I don't think the inflation is going to last forever. And I do think that comic books are going to stand the test of time. Right now, you see a lot of books continue to hit record sales, and you still see some dipping. So it's kind of all over the place, just depending on what book it is and where we're putting our money right now. I think some more people are going to be hit, though, over the next 6+ months. The remainder of 2022, I think, is going to be a rocky, rough road, including comic books. But I think the comic book market is far from crashing. I think that the comic book market is going to continue to stand hold. But I just want everyone to be careful. Do your due diligence. Be patient. Don't just spec buy. Don't just, on emotions or reactionary emotions or behavior. Be smart, because the smarter we are in our purchasing decisions, the better that the better that this industry is gonna hold, and the more steady these values are gonna hold on the market. So that is my video for today, folks. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you guys have any questions, leave those questions below as well. Again, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Be well, folks. And until next time, and remember, thank you again to popculturezone.com, and I will leave you with their 60-second clip. Don't forget to check them out, guys. Peace. Popculturezone.com is an online shop focusing on hot new comics, including exclusive and incentive variants, CGC graded comics, and tons of other inventory, including pop culture toys and other collectibles, all at low and competitive prices. PopCultureZone.com ships all over the US, and if you are buying raw comics, they offer flat rate shipping of only $4.99. That's right, $4.99. Absolute craziness, right? And there's no taxes included, excluding New Jersey. Pop Culture Zone is also on eBay, where they hold a 100% positive feedback rating with over 8,000 completed transactions for this year alone. Make sure to check out the link to their website below, as well as their eBay link, so be sure to give them a follow there as well.